feeling from me. Like I said, we've got an interview lined up here with Ben McKee of Volquest and Swain event. This is some really good stuff on the Tennessee fall camp, and I think you guys are really going to appreciate this one. All right, we're pleased to be joined by Ben McKee, co-host and producer of the outstanding Swain event radio show there in Knoxville, and he covers Tennessee for Volquest. He's a must-follow for every Tennessee fan out there at Ben McKee14 on Twitter. Ben, thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Mike, I appreciate you having me on. Hope you've been doing well.
I have been, and but not as well as you, my man. You're all over the airwaves. You're all over the beat. So I got to ask, do you have time to anything else on your plate? Is there any chance that you got any eligibility and you could play linebacker for the Vols this year?
I guess I could find maybe a spare year of eligibility somewhere, but I don't know that Tennessee would want me. I'm doing good to paint my new house and put flooring in and deal with that in the midst of fall camp. So I don't know that Brian Jean-Marie wants me playing in his linebacker room.
I gotcha. Well, hey, if anybody's missed it, you got to check out Ben's work over at Volquest, and one of my favorites is that he's put out here recently is just 11 storylines that he'd be watching heading into fall camp, and no surprise, number one on the list, the quarterback. So I got to ask you, Ben, just based on what you've seen, I know it's early in camp, but how are the quarterbacks looking for Tennessee?
They're looking solid. I don't think you can take a definitive stance on anybody just yet. You see the potential in the room, but it still obviously remains a big question mark and will remain a big question mark until somebody takes the bull by the horns and takes the job. Joe Milton is obviously the one that's generated the most headlines throughout fall camp, and that's just because he's so different than the rest. Tennessee sophomore receiver Jimmy Callaway said so himself when he met with the media last week, just speaking to his size and the type of ball that he throws. In the words of Jimmy Callaway, it's just different. And what he means by that is Milton is a guy that's obviously huge in stature, but has an even bigger arm, can throw it up to 80 yards in the air, and throws it with a lot of zip on his passes. So Milton's obviously generated a bunch of headlines this fall camp because of his size and because he is newer than the rest of the bunch. But he's looked solid through the first week or so of camp, and his biggest task right now, in my opinion, is just forming consistency. That's kind of what plagued him while he was at Michigan, just the inconsistency, inaccuracy with his passes. But then if he throws an incomplete pass, then he'll come back and just make an absolute beauty of a throw. So he's a guy that can make all the throws and has looked solid throughout the first week or so of camp. And I would say Hendon Hooker's probably right behind Joe Milton. Hendon Hooker is probably the most consistent of the bunch. At least he is, in my opinion. Not a guy that's going to throw the ball 80 yards in the air like a Joe Milton, but a guy that's just going to be steady Eddie and real solid and just looks real poised, and as he should. I mean, he's the guy in the bunch that's played the most football and done so at a pretty high level over at Virginia Tech in the ACC. And you go turn on the Miami Virginia Tech tape from last year, and you can see him making some really nice plays against a really good Miami defense. So Hooker's looked good as well. I think a week into camp, it's probably between those two, or I should say those two are out front, and I think Harrison Bailey is a little bit behind. Not out of the race by any means, but I do think Bailey is running behind those guys. And Bailey also not struggling, I should say, but working to be consistent along with Joe Milton. Just the ability to process information and the ability to push the ball down the field, but he's looked solid as well. And then I think Brian Maurer is definitely fourth in line there.
Now, what's your confidence level that whichever quarterback it is, that they're going to excel, given Josh Heupel's track record and his offense? Because I think a lot of Tennessee fans, and you can go the last couple of coaching staffs, it didn't seem like the fans have much faith in the coaches to make the right decision under center. at many seasons now, I'm thinking here. So what's your confidence level that in the quarterback that they do pick, that they'll make him very productive in this offense?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident. I mean, right now I have no reason not to be. We did assume that Jarrett Garantano was going to take a step forward when Jim Chaney was hired, because Jim Chaney had proven himself to be one of the better offensive coordinators in the SEC and in the country. So we assumed that JG would take a step. Obviously, that never happened. So you obviously take things with a grain of salt when you kind of project with any coach, just because you know that it's not a guaranteed success just because there's somebody new in charge. But to this point in Josh Heupel's coaching career, he's given no reason to think otherwise. Going back to his time at Missouri with Drew Lock, and I know there's a lot of talk amongst UCF fans that UCF took a step back after Scott Frost left to take Nebraska, but you're naturally going to take a step back when you go undefeated the year prior. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a couple of different statistical categories, UCF's offense got better under Josh Heupel, and the quarterbacks were improved under Josh Heupel, Dylan Gabriel, that is. So I'm fairly confident. We'll see. The proof will obviously be in the pudding, but between Joey Halzle, Tennessee's quarterbacks coach, Alex Golesh, the offensive coordinator, and Heupel, I have a hard time that they would pick the wrong person, and B, that in this quarterback-friendly offense that they're not going to get solid play at minimum. And based off quarterback play the last couple of years, I think solid quarterback play would be a big step in the right direction.
Now, one of the other storylines you said you'd be watching is who will start at left tackle. And I know you met with Glenn Ellerbe, the offensive line coach, and a couple of the linemen there. And I know it's early, but any indication on who that could be? Cade Mays, Dane Davis, anyone come to mind as Tennessee's potential starting left tackle?
Not at the moment, and that storyline has become even more interesting since I wrote that piece heading into camp last week. Going into camp, I thought the starter would prove to be Kayron Calvert. Now, his name wasn't written in pen. He was going to have to go out there and earn it, but out of Calvert, Dane Davis, and Jeremiah Crawford, a junior college signee that Tennessee recently brought in, I thought Calvert would prove to be the best out of those three. Calvert's a guy that has the talent and has the potential, but just hasn't been able to stay healthy during his time at Tennessee, and has mainly dealt with knee injuries, but had that cleaned up over the offseason and was ready to go. And unfortunately for him, suffered a biceps injury that looks like it's going to keep him out for several months, if not the entire season. So that obviously eliminates Kayron Calvert from the mix. And the reason I say that storyline has become even more interesting is because now it seems like they're trying to work Darnell Wright in at left tackle. I don't know if that's a permanent move, but they're at least mixing and matching and trying to test different options. And Darnell Wright, big five-star tackle coming in college, has primarily played right tackle, but has been getting a lot of work over at left tackle. So that opening has become real interesting, because if you can slide Darnell Wright over from right tackle to left tackle, then you likely slide in Cade Mays at right tackle. Then you would have Jerome Carvin at left guard, Cooper Mays at center, and Javonte Spraggins at right guard. And that's likely Tennessee's best five offensive linemen, which is the goal for Glenn Ellerbe and Alex Golesh and Josh Heupel, is to get the five best offensive linemen on the field.
Another big question is Tennessee's pass rush. Who do you think will lead this team in sacks and quarterback hurries this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Byron Young, the newcomer out of Georgia Military College. He's a guy that was very impressive in the spring, and just a guy that has a great mindset going into the season. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people, and his story is very deserving of success, because he's a guy that came from JUCO but did not have any scholarship offers coming out of high school, and saw a flyer just kind of around his school for a junior college football tryout, and he went and tried out for the JUCO team, and he made it. So a really neat storyline that truly epitomizes started from the bottom, as a lot of people like to say, because Byron Young did start from the bottom, and I think he's going to be one of Tennessee's best defenders this year. Again, he had a really, really nice spring when he early enrolled Ede, and I think he'll start on one of the edges opposite of Tyler Barron this fall, and I think he's going to be Tennessee's most consistent, most productive pass rusher.
All right, one of the other storylines you had is who will be Tennessee's number 3 receiver, but of course they know what they're getting in Volquest Jones Jr. Jalen Hyatt was at times spectacular last season as a freshman. Who are the early front runners, do you think, for Tennessee's number 3 receiver?
Yeah, I think Jimmy Callaway is the first one that comes to mind. He's very impressive, just really smooth out on the football field. I think it'll be Jimmy Callaway or Javonte Payton, the transfer from Mississippi State. I think it'll be one of those two guys. Volquest Jones Jr. is definitely going to be the top guy in the room, the most reliable guy. I think Volquest is going to put himself in a position to be drafted. And then Jalen Hyatt has looked really good in camp so far, has a very business-like approach, truly treats every rep, every practice, every day like it's his only opportunity to make it to the NFL. And there's been a real business-like approach for Jalen Hyatt. So I think those two are going to really have big years. And obviously the quarterback position will depend on how big of a year those two have. But if Joe Milton, Hendon Hooker, Harrison Bailey, if they can step up and really be good for Tennessee, then Jalen Hyatt and Volquest Jones, I mean, those guys are going to light the world on fire this year. So you're comfortable with your top 2 guys in the room. And I think Tennessee's fairly comfortable with its number 3 guy as well. I mentioned Jimmy Callaway and Javonte Payton, 2 speedsters, 2 guys that can make plays, and I think that they will make plays this season for Tennessee.
Are there any other players that have stood out to you? Just maybe just caught your eye in camp that you've yet to mention?
The one is Jalen Hyatt. I kind of just talked about him. He's honestly been the one that's been most impressive so far in camp, just because, as I mentioned, the business-like approach. But in terms of somebody that I have not mentioned, I'd go to the defensive side of the ball and mention Warren Burrell. I think everybody thinks of Alontae Taylor as Tennessee's top corner, and I don't think people are wrong for doing that. But I have a feeling, and I think Warren Burrell is really going to push Alontae to be Tennessee's top corner. I think Warren Burrell has been very impressive over the first week or so, and he's a guy that has starting experience and started as a freshman and then lost his job when he got hurt. So he's healthy, and he's looked very good through the first week or so of camp. He's a junior now, and you can tell that he has that classic urgency that most upperclassmen have as they try to round out their career in a positive way and get to the league. So Warren Burrell is a name that I have not mentioned that kind of first comes to mind when you ask me about guys who have stood out.
Now, you shared some comments here from Dane Davis today that went kind of viral of just, the energy there at practice under Josh Heupel, completely different. Can you kind of rehash that for the listeners? And is that something that you've seen that, it's not unique to Dane Davis, but maybe the players just having more fun on the practice field?
Absolutely. And Dane Davis was not shy in his comments about the difference in the environment, and he was talking about practice specifically, but it's more than just practice. It's just everyday life in the football facility. It's different. It's night and day different, and all of the players have spoken to that. Not all of them have been as strong in their comments as Dane Davis was today. And I loved how Dane Davis compared it to Monday, how somebody like you and me, we go to work on Monday dreading to go to work. And that's what practice was like every day in the facility was like under the previous coaching staff. And now there's no more Monday. There's no more Mondays, sorry. No more Mondays. Everything is fun. Everything is a fun day for Tennessee football at the moment. And it's just a polar opposite feeling within the football facility, and several of his teammates have illustrated that throughout the first week or so of camp when they've spoken with the media. But Dane Davis definitely did not hold back and spoke to the last coaching staff and just how they just zapped the energy out of everybody within the facility. And Again, so many players have alluded to it. There's no sense of entitlement amongst the best players on the roster. That entitlement is gone. So Dane Davis very strong in his comments, and all of his teammates have also echoed that throughout the first week or so in camp. But that also goes back to spring. I mean, you heard those same type of comments back in spring practice, and it's not talk. It's genuine. There's a different vibe in the building right now, and we'll see if it translates to wins on the field. But the culture is definitely different under Josh Heupel so far, and that's a huge step in the right direction.
All right, last thing for you, Ben. I really appreciate all the time you've given me, but there's always the diehards that are going to think Tennessee is going to do well no matter what. But I'm seeing quite a bit of negativity. Some fans, maybe as we're getting closer to football, that's going away. But just this offseason, a lot of Tennessee fans not that excited. Can you give us a reason for optimism? Throw out a thing or two that makes you think Tennessee can really overachieve this season in the SEC East. And I'm not saying win the division, obviously, but you're seeing some people have them as the sixth best team in the East, which I think is crazy. But can you give us a reason for optimism heading into the season?
Yeah, I think you don't look anywhere else other than the quarterback position. I know nobody's really asserted themselves just yet, but you have somebody other than the previous quarterback playing quarterback. I think that should be all the optimism in the world, and kind of going hand in hand, you have somebody coaching the football team other than the last person who was coaching the football team. So I think just a change in personnel should excite people. And I don't really know what the true definition of Tennessee succeeding this season is for most people. In my mind, it's 6 or 7 wins, and with this schedule, I think it's obtainable. Typically, Tennessee's schedule always seems like it's the toughest in the country, or one of the 5 toughest in the country. You've had to go to Oregon. You've had to open it up against the best West Virginia team in 20 years, it felt like. But this year is much different. You don't have to go to Oklahoma. Oklahoma doesn't come here. You play Pittsburgh week 2, and I'm not chalking that up as a W for Tennessee, but Josh Heupel in year 1 would much rather face Pittsburgh than Butch Jones having to travel to Oregon year 1, or Jeremy Pruitt having to play West Virginia in Charlotte year 1, or Oklahoma in year 2. You would much rather play Pittsburgh at home. So you also don't draw a really tough second team out of the West. You do play Ole Miss, and that game will be difficult because Lane Kiffin and Matt Corral are going to be able to put up some points. But Ole Miss's defense is still going to be trash. So if Josh Heupel's offensive system is what it seems to be, then you should be able to put up points as well. And that's a home game. You're definitely capable of winning that game is what I'm getting at. So the Pittsburgh game is winnable. Ole Miss game is winnable. And there are several others, South Carolina, Missouri. Kentucky will be challenging, but I think that's a game Tennessee could win. So the fact that there's new leadership, there's a new vibe, I think there's definitely a recipe for overachievement for Tennessee this season.
All right, he's Ben McKee. Catch him every morning with Jason Swain over at the Swain event, and check out all his work at Volquest. Really appreciate you, Ben. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, Mike, really appreciate you having me.
All right, so I just want to say thanks again to Ben McKee for joining the show and dropping some knowledge on Tennessee camp. Tennessee fans are dying to know what's going on up there on Rocky Top with the new coaching staff and the quarterback battle and everything that goes with it. So really good stuff from Ben. You've got to check out his work at Volquest. Got to listen to the Swain event if you're not already. That's not only one of the best shows in Knoxville covering the Vols, but one of the best shows in the entire SEC. So check out the Swain event, which plays every weekday morning there in Knoxville. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. And, I apologize that the interview was not in video format. I mean, you would not believe how long this has taken me to do this stuff. The way I look at it, I'm like one of these players, man. I'm in camp right now. I got to get my ass in shape for the season, and I'm working my tail off. I was up till 1 a.m. last night doing these video edits, so I'm going to keep doing it until I can't do it anymore. And the response has been terrific. So I cannot thank each and every one of you enough. Again, check us out on YouTube. And if you haven't already, give us that 5-star written review on the Apple Podcast app and share that with us at thatsecpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll send you a beer koozie of your choice just for doing that. But I really do appreciate each and every one of you, all the support. And Cousin Shane, he'll be back on the next one. At least that's the plan. So maybe he'll have his camera hooked up by then. Don't hold your breath. But maybe he will. We'll find out together. But that's going to do it. Catch you on the next one.